Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or you're streaming the shows on the apps of those two fine radio stations. Highly recommend you download those. And the best part is they're free. Free to download, free to use, and sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and well-being for all. It will indeed be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts. You can call or text them into the show at 719-247-1313. Producer Ray standing by, eagerly awaiting your correspondence. I do think last night the way that Game 5 ended was kind of fitting. Minnesota missing a shot at the rim as time's winding down in garbage time. I felt it was emblematic of how different Game 5 was to Game 4. Because you know how Game 4 ended, right, with Jaden McDaniels and that whole thing. So I thought it was appropriate that game ended with Minnesota again trying to get a late bucket, slightly different circumstances, but missing it. So the Denver Nuggets survive. We will get a Game 6. And what I tried to do last night as I was watching the game and into today, want to try to separate, try to ignore the elephant in the room being Anthony Edwards in a smaller elephant in Dante DiVincenzo. Like, I know those things play a big role, but what I tried to find last night was, what about the Nuggets win could be somewhat independent of what's going on. And I don't think everything last night could be chalked up to, well, Minnesota doesn't have Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo. And I know the Minnesota Timberwolves just could not match the desperation level of the Denver Nuggets. But I thought two things that, even if you grant those factors, two things that I think were part of the reason why the Nuggets won the game, but also what you can buy into moving forward if you want to believe that the Denver Nuggets are going to pull this off and come back from 3-1 down to win this series. And the first thing is the physicality. Right? That's something that in large part is born out of the fact that your season is on the line. Sure. But why can't that be replicated? Especially on the offensive end. I feel like when I try to put aside Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo, I keep getting left with what the Nuggets did on the offensive end of the floor. I think that's the stuff that you can buy into. And that's the stuff that I don't know if necessarily Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo make all the difference in the world. But that physicality, that's what we have been asking for this entire series, and Jonas Valanciunas knows that we have.
That's what we need to do, as everybody been talking lately. We gotta be physical. That's it. They're a physical team. We can be physical the same way.
Listening to Jonas Valanciunas, just as an aside, I need him to play more, just because I want it. I was weirdly entertained and enthralled by Jonas Valanciunas' post-game scrum by his locker last night. But he hits the nail on the head. Yeah, we've been asking for this. What took you so long? Why is that level of physicality only coming out of the Denver Nuggets at this point? Is it just because they're desperate? And that's why I think if that is the case, They're going to be just as desperate in game 6, no? Just as desperate in game 7. So if that's what it took to bring the physicality out of this Denver Nuggets team, then I think it's something that they'll be able to sustain potentially for game 6 and game 7. But it's so Nuggets, right? So after game 3, Jaden McDaniels goes down the entire roster and calls every single one of the Denver Nuggets out, or at least the core players, right? For all being bad defenders. And I know that the Nuggets can't do a whole lot on the defensive end to do anything about that. But the fact that they went at Jaden McDaniels twice early in the game and got him into early foul trouble, and they continued the physicality throughout the game, like that's the appropriate response to what Jaden McDaniels said. But it's true to form with the Denver Nuggets. Nothing about this team follows a predictive pattern, right? You think, okay, this is the game where this is going to happen because this happened before. Nope. The Nuggets, they don't want to be boxed in. They don't want you to have them figured out. Last night would have been an appropriate response to Jaden McDaniels' comments. But perhaps it took what happened at the end of game 4 to bring it out of this team. Here's David Adelman on what impact the way game 4 ended with that little fracas by the Wolves bench, if that influenced game 5.
I have no idea. I mean, obviously, guys didn't like how the game ended, but stuff like that happens in playoff games. I don't know why he wouldn't laid it in. Like I said, that's who he is. He's done that in the past. When I said that, I meant that there's a history of that. So I don't know. It's his decision. We didn't enjoy it.
Didn't really answer the question. He said, I don't know. And then he went on to clarify his comments about Jaden McDaniels doing that. I think it did. I'll answer the question if David Adelman won't. And that is another topic of conversation on today's show, David Adelman's press conference responses. But I do think that the way game 4 ended had to impact game 5. I don't know why Jaden McDaniels calling every single player on the Denver Nuggets out isn't the catalyst to bring this out of them. Why they need more stimuli to be able to do it, that Jaden McDaniels also has to dunk at the end of game 4 to get them riled up. Or maybe it's just the fact that they weren't on the verge of elimination after Jaden McDaniels said what he said. I mean, none of this is, I think, saying something great about the Denver Nuggets. But again, I think it's something that you can look at last night and say, why can't this happen in game 6? Why can't this happen in game 7? If it's truly the desperation, even more than anything Jaden McDaniels does, this team should be able to sustain this physicality. And in comparing them to the Colorado Avalanche, as I tend to do, the Avalanche just played an incredibly physical 4-game series and won all 4 of those games. Not their preferred style of play by any stretch of the imagination. But they played it because they knew it was necessary. That's what we have been talking about with the Denver Nuggets. You may not want to play the way Minnesota does. And that's why, that old saying, styles make fights. It's why you hate playing Minnesota, is because they are so physical. It's why you struggle against OKC, because they are so physical and you don't want to be physical back. That's not who you are. But it's necessary to be physical. It just, you have to do that. Any perceived gap in talent between the Denver Nuggets and some of their foes in the Western Conference, it's gone. right? They have to meet some of these teams, especially Minnesota, where they play. They have to be able to beat them at their own game. Maybe it doesn't have to be now, it has to be for 3 straight games because that's the situation they find themselves in. But dreaming about the Nuggets still somehow finding a way to match up with OKC, that's going to be required. They're going to have to play certain games, especially on the road, on the terms that OKC dictates. It's the sign of a championship caliber team that they're able to win in different ways. And they're certainly going to have to play that way in Game 6. It's not the way they want to play, but as Jonas Valanciunas pointed out, it was necessary. We all caught on to it. It's just, why are the Denver Nuggets picking this up a game later than we were all saying they should? Maybe it's one of the flaws of this team. But the physicality that the Denver Nuggets showed was necessary to them winning Game 5. It will be necessary for them to win Game 6 and to win Game 7. Regardless of who's on the other side of the court, regardless of who, comes out of the tunnel to the Stone Cold Steve Austin theme. Nikola Jokic said last night he has a feeling that Anthony Edwards is going to play in Game 6. And he was the guy that knew Aaron Gordon was not going to play in Game 4. Game 3, 3 days prior. So maybe Jokic has some clairvoyant powers. But the physicality is going to be necessary, whether it's against this version of the Minnesota Timberwolves or against a full-strength version of the Minnesota Timberwolves or a closer to full-strength version of the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 6 and potentially Game 7. So the physicality, that's one thing that the Nuggets brought last night that I think you can believe could be sustained. Here's the other one. And I think you have to give the physicality, give some credit for the physicality to this guy, Nikola Jokic. I talked about this the other day. The Nuggets are built on the premise that Nikola Jokic is going to come out every night and be the best player in the world. We see what happens when he's not. Everything else goes haywire. Lo and behold, Nikola Jokic, playoff triple-double, had a double-double, I think, within a quarter or something like that. He was great. And then you look around and you're like, oh, Cam Johnson looks a little bit better tonight. Spencer Jones looks a little bit better tonight. It's funny how that works. It all starts from Nikola Jokic. The burden this guy carries on his shoulders is unlike the burden any other star carries as consistently on their shoulders. If Nikola Jokic is right, the Denver Nuggets can do a lot of really good things. Like I thought from start till about 5 minutes left in the game, I thought it was a great Nuggets performance. And all of that coincided with Nikola Jokic looking like Nikola Jokic. And not like the physicality, not only is that level of play from Nikola Jokic necessary, I think you can believe that you would get it moving forward in this series, as David Adelman explains.
These sample size games and the freakouts when he doesn't play well, he's going to play well. I mean, and his 16 assists, to somebody's point earlier, assists are hard to get unless you make shots.
And he's right. Right? Guys were making shots. But again, chicken or the egg here. Nikola Jokic isn't more effective as a distributor if guys are making shots. Nikola Jokic is more effective as a distributor if that gravity that he has is working. and guys are cheating towards him, and teams are having to send more bodies at him. Rudy Gobert's defense, as good as it has been at times in this series, it wasn't what it has been. And Nikola Jokic took advantage, and Minnesota had to kind of shade a little bit over. They had to pay a little bit more attention. Now Jokic is distributing it. And then, yes, the guys got to make the shots that they are being given. But it all stems from Nikola Jokic. I've made this comparison before with Nikola Jokic. If the Nuggets offense is the solar system, Nikola Jokic is the sun. Okay? You have seen enough sci-fi movies. In fact, Project Hail Mary, isn't that that movie about this too? If your sun is dying, then everything else dies. Sorry, I hope that it's not really a spoiler. They set it up pretty quickly within the start of that movie that's what's going on. If Nikola Jokic is right, the Denver Nuggets on the whole are right. If he's not right, nobody is. And to what David Adelman brought up, like, he has to understand why people freak out when Nikola Jokic doesn't play well. Now, let's not do the outlier stuff. Kevin O'Connor and some of these other people who all of a sudden want to say that Nikola Jokic isn't the best player in the world. Okay, setting outside those extreme outlier takes, the more reasonable people like you and I understand that while this doesn't, a bad game or two doesn't completely change the perspective of who Nikola Jokic is, but it's worth panicking over, it's worth freaking out over, because you know that nothing else with the Denver Nuggets works unless he's working. So perhaps Nikola Jokic has found a little bit of a groove. Is it potentially something that he has figured out going against Rudy Gobert?
I mean, I'm saying this every time. And he's a great defender. You know, he's making you to do a little bit extra in every possession, every situation. So, I mean, I think I played probably the most of any other guy. I think I'm playing against him the most through my whole career. So I think we know each other really well. Even when we play overseas for national team. So, you know, I think we know each other pretty well.
If a team tries to throw different looks at Jokic, his supercomputer brain will be able to decipher it and give him about a half to a game, and he'll have it figured out. It's a different situation in this series because it's Rudy on him. That's what it's been for the vast majority of this series, and that's what it continues to be. So what he's talking about there, it's not him figuring out Rudy Gobert. I think what it is, and what you certainly hope is the case if you're a Nuggets fan, is just that the level of defense that Rudy Gobert has played, it is not sustainable over the course of a 7-game series. He could do it for a game. He could do it for even 2 games, and full marks to him for that. This isn't Nikola Jokic figuring out Rudy Gobert. It's the fact that no basketball player on planet Earth can hold this guy down for the entirety of a 7-game series. It's part of the beauty of a 7-game series. It determines the best team, or at least it's a more foolproof way of doing that than the one-off that the March Madness or the NFL playoffs are. Over the course of 7 games, either Nikola Jokic is going to figure you out, or as is the case with Rudy Gobert, it's just you can't defend this guy, the best player in the world, like you did for a couple of games for 7. Physicality and the way that Nikola Jokic played. Those have been keys to this series. They were key in the Nuggets winning last night, but I do think there are things that, if replicated, can help the Nuggets pull this thing off. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Just getting going on Drive Time Sports. You're listening to 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Tomorrow night, Switchbacks FC will be taking on the Colorado Rapids in the round of 16 of the U.S. Open Cup. Roland Vargas and myself will be on the call 7 o'clock on Extra Sports 1300. Perhaps some history in the making, or some more history in the making, because this is the furthest in this tournament the Switchbacks have gone, and to be able to knock off the MLS team in their state would be even more history. So join us, won't you? Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Extra Sports 1300 in the Extra Sports 1300 app. So I know that the injuries to Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo are changing this series. I would like somebody to point out, and plenty of people have, but I just think we can't forget the importance of Aaron Gordon and the fact that the Denver Nuggets have really not had Aaron Gordon for most of this playoff run. So the whataboutism that goes on, yes, the Wolves were well on their way to winning this series. Okay, and the point that it shifted, if it ultimately does go the Nuggets' way, will be the injuries to Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo. But we also have to keep in mind that part of the reason why it was going so well for Minnesota was because the one guy that ties in the entire defensive side of the court for the Denver Nuggets, and the guy that you would expect to be retaliating, not in a physical way, but retaliating, going at Jaden McDaniels for his shenanigans, hasn't been available or has been severely limited for the Denver Nuggets. And look, injuries happen. Every team goes through them, and there have been teams that have been able to get past the first round despite having a key injury. I just say all this talk about Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo, yes, that's ultimately where this series is pivoting, or appears to be pivoting. But let's not forget why the Wolves, and a big reason why the Wolves had the lead that they had. So just fair is fair. Not trying to play the whataboutism game, but what about Aaron Gordon? I guess I am a little bit here. But we know that Minnesota is not going to be nearly as dynamic offensively. Much easier for this pretty mediocre Nuggets defense to be able to defend. And you saw that last night. The Nuggets did a great job defensively on that version of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And one of the guys that I was impressed with, that also maybe the headline is what he did on the offensive end, is Spencer Jones. Scores 20 points, but I thought also he did the guy that you would look at with Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo out, the natural place for who's going to be the guy for the Wolves, it was Julius Randle. And Spencer Jones was on him a large portion of the evening, and I thought did a very good job. And he did it stepping in for the heart and soul of the basketball team, Aaron Gordon. So while the physicality and while Nikola Jokic are maybe the primary reasons why the Denver Nuggets won that game, I do not want to gloss over the fact that Spencer Jones, is it comparable to Ayo Dosunmu for the Timberwolves in the previous game? Debate amongst yourselves. But the fact of the matter is the Denver Nuggets got their own kind of version of that. A role player that there's a lot to like about him, but you certainly don't expect him to star for you, and through some difficult circumstances is able to raise his game and be part of the reason why the Nuggets kept their season alive. Here's Spencer Jones on his approach to stepping into the spotlight last night in Game 5?
It's not new, it's something that's kind of, happened throughout the season, guys going down and then we get an opportunity to start and everything like that. So, I mean, a lot of it is just not treated any differently. I mean, yeah, I'll get maybe more minutes and everything like that, but the role is still the same. The duties are still the same. I just got to do it, for more time out there on the floor. And so I think about it pretty simply.
And there's a reason why I left out the Spencer Jones conversation in the first segment. Okay, because I started the show by saying, what can be largely independent of the injuries to Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo, but also what are the things that you could come close to banking on that the Nuggets will be able to bring in the last 2 games of the series? A performance like that from Spencer Jones is not on that list for me. Just like Ayo Dosunmu putting up 40 was not something that Timberwolves fans should honestly expect after what happened in Game 4. And the reason for that is very simple. This is one of the unalienable truths of basketball. Role players play better at home. They're more comfortable. The crowd is on their side. It's something to be able to perform no matter the venue, home, road, hostile environment. That's something you have to develop. And young players, role players that aren't called upon as much, don't develop that skill, for lack of a better word, as quickly as the stars do, because they don't go through it. So as great of a story as Spencer Jones was last night, I don't think that you can bank on that happening again. In fact, it is more likely that the unlikeliest hero in Game 6 wears the Timberwolves uniform. And that is a big reason why I could be talked into it over the next couple of days. But right now, I can't sit here and say I expect the Denver Nuggets to win Game 6. But the reason why I could be talked into it, I could be convinced, is the physicality that the Denver Nuggets did not have at all this series showing up because the desperation level went up and Nikola Jokic looking more like Nikola Jokic. But if you're telling me that Spencer Jones is going to have to do that in order for the Nuggets to win Game 6, or somebody else has to step up like that in Game 6, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you need some combination of Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson back. And I know Peyton Watson, a role player, but not a Spencer Jones role player. If he were to perform well, it would not, be this complete shock, because you've seen Peyton Watson come up big in some big, at least regular season games. I guess the way I would actually put it is they need Aaron Gordon. And if they can't get Aaron Gordon, with the Wolves being as shorthanded as they are, I will settle for Peyton Watson. I think that's the better way to put it. You told me Aaron Gordon's going to be good to go in Game 6. The Nuggets are winning Game 6, and I already stated yesterday that if the Nuggets win Game 6, they're winning Game 7. With Peyton Watson, I think it might be possible. Here's David Adelman on whether he's going to have either for the next biggest game of the Nuggets season.
I have no idea. It's frustrating, obviously. But I think we have to prepare like they're not going to. But then, if the updates get positive, then you can change your routine, so to speak, of how you prepare, because obviously it changes your game plan a lot, especially defensively. And not to mention, it changes your offense with two guys that can play point forward for you in a series that you need ball handling.
And they got some of that ball handling from Tyus Jones last night. So part of the physicality came from Jonas Valanciunas, the ball handling that they had been struggling with, putting all of that on Jamal Murray to dribble the ball all the way up the court with Jaden McDaniels all over him. They were able to pass that off to Tyus Jones. But he's another player where I say you expect him to do that in Minnesota. I'm not betting on it. I think Aaron Gordon gives it a go. Because if for no other reason, I'm not saying that he's going to be way healthier than he is today or he was before Game 5. But because I know Aaron Gordon, he's going to try and give it a go. I think it's just like the idea where they were going to hold him out and then try to play him. I think it's the same thing here. Now, you're taking a huge risk because if you lose in Game 5, you're done. But I think the Nuggets probably have hope that, if we hold them out of this game, and we got 2 days, and then it's Game 6, maybe that's enough time for Aaron Gordon to get healthier. I don't know how effective he's going to be. If it's the same plan with Aaron Gordon, it might be the same result. It might be an Aaron Gordon who is laboring, an Aaron Gordon who is an explosive, and an Aaron Gordon who David Adelman ultimately decides it's just not fair for me to put him in this position. Maybe that's going to be the case. But my gut says that Aaron Gordon's going to be available for Game 6. And if they could get something from him, because there are some other factors that are in. Yes, the injuries to Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo. I think that Minnesota, and Nikola Jokic talked about this after the game, I think that Minnesota is going to, with the extra time off, make some more adjustments. And I think they'll be able to compensate for the losses of those two guys a little bit better than they were able to do last night on the road, with a day in between. Now they got 2 days, they're at home, all this kind of stuff. I think they're offensively, the Wolves are going to look a little bit better than they did in Game 5. But I think now the pressure is very much on Minnesota. I think what I'm saying about, if the Nuggets win Game 6, they're winning Game 7. I think that in a quiet moment, Minnesota might have that kind of feeling too. If they can't right the ship at home in Game 6, I think some part of their brain is screaming, you're not going to win this series. So maybe that means, and you could use that for good or for evil, right? You could, if you're Minnesota, you could use it for good and say, now your desperation level is going to go up and match the Nuggets. Or it could be used for evil and you don't know what to do with yourself and you kind of squander an opportunity to close the series out at home. I think the pressure is now on Minnesota. I don't think it was last night. It will be now. And then you add a potential Aaron Gordon return to the mix, and he is somewhat effective. Then we start building on these layers on top of it where I get to a point where I'm like, maybe the Nuggets do win Game 6. Or maybe I'm just being stubborn. You can tell me, 719-247-1313. Do you think that the Nuggets, let's just, if you want to go a step further and say the Nuggets will win this series, that's fine. I just want to know if you think last night was not the last game that the Nuggets will play at Ball Arena this season. Am I just being negative Nelly or whatever you want to say? I need some things to happen in the next couple of days to get me on the side that the Nuggets are going to win Game 6. But those things could happen. That's what I say. I could be talked into it. 719-24-7-1313. Coming up next, I regret to inform you that Nathan McKinnon is not going to win the NHL MVP award this year. I'll explain why next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. So not to rain on the parade of the Nuggets winning Game 5, but I regret to inform you that Nathan MacKinnon will not be named the NHL's MVP this year, signified by winning the Hart Trophy. And the reason why I know this is the case is because throughout the history of the National Hockey League, 67% of winners of the Ted Lindsay Award, which the players vote on for the most outstanding player in the league, 67% of the players that win that trophy also win the Hart Trophy that year. Nathan MacKinnon isn't even a finalist for the Ted Lindsay Award this year. So that's how I know he's not going to win MVP. Now, I do expect him to be a finalist for MVP. Although I was quite shocked at the finalists for the Ted Lindsay, if I'm being honest. So I guess I'm allowing myself to be surprised again. But I don't think it's going to happen for Nathan MacKinnon because the way that the players feel is at least a decent indication of how the voters feel. They don't always see eye to eye. 1 out of 3 chance that they don't. But the fact that Nathan MacKinnon's not even a finalist for the Ted Lindsay tells me he's not going to win MVP. And let me tell you why this is dumb. Okay? The MVP conversation, I think Nikita Kucherov, and I'm guilty of this, I have to really work diligently to remind myself just how good Nikita Kucherov is. He is in... It's just funny. Tampa Bay is like the Siberia of the NHL. Like nobody pays attention to anything happening in Tampa until they're right in front of your face during the Stanley Cup playoffs. Then you have to acknowledge their existence. He's on the other side of the world as far as, you know, I'm concerned most of the time. And it's not because I'm anti Nikita Kucherov or I dislike the Tampa Bay Lightning. In fact, I'm a huge fan of John Cooper. And that might be a little bit bold to say, given he was on the other side of the Avs last Stanley Cup win, and there were some Avs fans that did not like John Cooper in that series. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I like him a lot. And I like Nikita Kucherov. Remember when he did a Stanley Cup winning press conference shirtless while drinking beers? Like, that dude's a legend. But it's just Tampa Bay, and maybe this is, you know, that mountain time zone bias I keep hearing about. But I have to work really hard to remind myself that there is one of the 3 or 4 best players in the world playing down in Tampa. So and Nikita Kucherov, let's face it, most valuable player. One of the criteria or one of the things that voters look at is who's doing more with less. And that was always going to be the biggest hurdle for Nathan MacKinnon to clear, is that his team was such a wagon. But I will say, if there are any NHL voters who watch the NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to win MVP. He had the best team. Can we not look at the impact of the player and making them the best team in the league? I think Nathan MacKinnon has a similar argument. It doesn't mean that Nathan MacKinnon has to be the MVP because Shai is the MVP. It doesn't even mean that Shai should be the MVP or that Nathan MacKinnon should. But you could certainly make an argument for Nikita Kucherov being the MVP. I feel like this of all years, Connor McDavid being MVP, I know it's supposed to be a one-off, but tell me Nikola Jokic has had it held against him that maybe he's not as good this MVP year as he was last. I look at I'm like, he's going to win the MVP this year? All we talked about is how garbage the Pacific Division is. And I know Connor McDavid's great, but I'm just saying, like, the entire idea of the Pacific Division and the Edmonton Oilers, if we're being fair, is that they are not as good as they have been the last few years. That division is terrible, and the Oilers had to scratch and claw to make their way even into a postseason spot in that terrible division. So while Connor McDavid can still be great, is he really checking every box to be an MVP? So I don't know that McDavid has one more than Nathan MacKinnon. I think it's really Kucherov that I would be deciding between. So I could understand if Nathan MacKinnon is up for the Hart Trophy and does not win it. I could understand the argument. I would disagree with it, but I could understand it. The Ted Lindsay Award is given to the most outstanding player. What many people vote for the MVP. They just take the best player. That's literally what the Ted Lindsay Award is. So this is not Connor McDavid. This is not Nikita Kucherov, both nominated for the Ted Lindsay Award. What is Macklin Celebrini doing being a finalist over Nathan MacKinnon? Okay, the Ted Lindsay Award is pretty straightforward. As far as awards go, as subjective as they can be, the Ted Lindsay Award seems pretty straightforward. Most outstanding player. Who are the best players in the NHL? Macklin Celebrini has had a terrific season. If there was a most improved player award in the NHL, give it to Macklin Celebrini today. You don't even need to tally the votes. And yes, he made the Sharks relevant this year. But in no universe is Macklin Celebrini right now a better player than Nathan MacKinnon. Or to use the words of the Ted Lindsay Award, more outstanding player. The Ted Lindsay Award should just be who are the three best players in the NHL this year? Nikita Kucherov, Connor McDavid, and how about the guy who scored more goals than anybody else in the league this year? Would that guy perhaps qualify? And I'm not even, and I keep getting suckered into this because I don't even really care who gets second and third place votes. I am a straight, who's your guy? But because they have this system in place and I see these votes, I got to comment on it. Nathan MacKinnon, it should be MacKinnon, Kucherov, and McDavid. Macklin Celebrini, you had a phenomenal season. The future is incredibly bright in San Jose. It is not your time, young man. Nathan MacKinnon led the league in goals, was the best player on a team that was the best team in the league from beginning to end. And do you think Marty Necas, his 100-point season was just Marty Necas all of a sudden figuring out the game of hockey? Or could it be because he was playing with 29 all season long? That's ridiculous. I can understand if Nathan MacKinnon ultimately doesn't win the MVP, although he would be my vote. But the idea that he's not even a finalist for the best player in the league, that's terrible. Welcome in. Great to have you. Special thanks to those of you watching the show anywhere you scroll at 740 KVOR and at Extra Sports 1300. While you're there, like, subscribe, follow, and comment. And I can even, through the wonder that is technology, display your comment on the live stream. If you are listening to the show or you just like using more traditional means of communication better, be my guest, 719-247-1313. You could call or text in your thoughts. Ray stepped out, but he's going to be back, so we'll be good. He'll be able to take your call or text. So Nuggets get done last night. I don't know how these sports books keep doing this, because I said on the show before Game 5 I would take Minnesota minus or plus 11.5, and the Nuggets win by 12, and the Wolves missed a layup at the end of the game. Like, are you kidding me? How does this keep happening? Well, what do they say? There's a reason why there are those great big buildings in Las Vegas. And I love those great big buildings, so I don't want to change anything. I'm just saying it's spooky sometimes. Devin Booker, do you have a comment on these things? No. So Nuggets stay alive. Okay, in large part because they found, the physicality, the want to, the effort that we have all been asking for them to bring for a few games now. They finally did it. The desperation of having your back truly against the wall, your season on the line, the Nuggets brought it forth. And I think that there's reason to think they could do it again in Game 6 and Game 7. But I never quite understood why David Adelman got so upset about it. Like, I understand it a little bit, and I explained this yesterday. If the Nuggets lack motivation or lack want to, that is something that we routinely put on the coach. So if the Nuggets aren't motivated, that's on David Adelman. If they're not executing, then that's on the players. And I think there was some subconscious defense mechanism that kicked in a little bit with David Adelman the other night. And that's why he pushed back so strong against the notion that his team wasn't trying hard or wasn't. And the way it looked to me was maybe the Nuggets want it, but they clearly don't want it as much as Minnesota. And this is why I keep saying I'm not sold on the Nuggets winning Game 6. Because I do think a big reason why you saw the effort you had last night was because the Wolves would fight another day, even if they lost, and the Nuggets, there was no tomorrow. And there's just no substitute for that. So I think the desperation level for Minnesota is going to go up a little bit, and then we'll really see in Game 6 whether the Nuggets can match that and whether they can bring that level of effort into back-to-back games. So I think we on this side, we're all on the same page. Maybe it wasn't that the Nuggets didn't care at all, but they sure didn't seem like they cared as much as Minnesota. But it came across very weird. Maybe it's because David Adelman is not super combative, but it just felt like, man, it really struck a chord with him, like in a weird way. And then we move on with our lives, right? Well, not exactly. So David Adelman steps to the podium last night, and it was the same reporter that asked the question, where is your team's competitive fire? Had another question for David Adelman, and David Adelman was not having it.
Coach, that's your best offensive showing of the series so far.
The offense doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've never said that. Did you get the level of physicality you were looking for on offense tonight?
It was better in the first 4 games.
And then the next 2 or 3 questions that David Edelman answered were very short, like almost pouting in a way. And I get the reporter, and he works for DNVR. I've had him on this show many moons ago. The question that he asked of David Edelman, he probably could have worded it a more delicate way. Okay, it was a little clumsy. But the point was right. The question was valid. And coaches got to deal with these kind of things. And trust me, and David Edelman should know this. I know his dad, was in, Minnesota and Portland, and those aren't, the bright lights of LA or New York or Philadelphia. I understand that. But he's been around this business a long time. Okay, he should understand that there are going to be questions asked that he may not like. But there's a way to answer them to not make it seem like it bothers you to your core. Like you're spending, it felt like he walked into that room with an agenda. Now, he opened up a little bit as the press conference went on, and we grabbed a lot of his audio. He had some very insightful answers. But he just seemed triggered. And I love this state, and I love the Denver market, and I like most everybody that shows up to those press conferences and that covers the Denver Nuggets. But they are not nearly what it is in New York and Philadelphia. And the fact that a reporter who asks, again, maybe a clumsy question, but asking a question that really spoke to the feeling of Nuggets fans. We forget this sometimes, that the media is the conduit between the team and the fans. And the question that he was asked the other night was very much on behalf of Nuggets fans. And he had a chance there. And I think he got around to it eventually. But he had a chance to answer it immediately and not get, so caught up in how dare you ask that kind of question. I mean, that's kind of how he came off. How dare you ask that? Like, he has to understand why we would arrive at this conclusion. Right? Defend your players, absolutely. But be so put off by the question that even a couple of days later, you're being short with the same reporter who was asking a very positive Nuggets question. Sometimes, and these aren't, mortal sins in the coaching world. Right? Getting a little bit too bent out of shape about a question is not a reason to be fired. Okay, but it is something that happens sometimes with first-year coaches. And because it is such a unique circumstance why David Edelman is the head coach, you have to remind yourself sometimes that this is his first full year in the league. His first full go-round of, pregame, postgame press conferences, radio shows, being the leader of the team, being the mouthpiece of the team, all this kind of stuff, that there are going to be stumbles. So I don't want to rake him across the coals too much, but it's just like, come on. Like, why that question was asked. You have to understand the feeling. I mean, Jonas Valanciunas, like, maybe he wasn't pleased by the fact that everyone was talking about a lack of physicality, but at least he understood that it was a sentiment that was being shared by the general population.
That's what we need to do as everybody been talking lately. You know, we gotta be physical.
Okay, he probably doesn't like being called out, and then the entire Nuggets team was kind of called out. I'm sure they don't like it. You don't have to like it, but to seem like this guy is like gotcha journalism or is trying to catch you off balance, like these questions are coming. Defend your team, sure, but there was something really off. And then he referenced the question later. Like, it is sat with David Adelman in the middle of a series that the Denver Nuggets are fighting for their lives. There should be 0% of David Adelman's brain that worries what a member of the media is asking him. Like, he's got to figure out all these other things with the Denver Nuggets. And it just felt like he dwelled on it. It felt like he brought it back, invited everyone going, because I even had people ask me today, no, they didn't understand what happened and why David Adelman would be that short and with a reporter. It just invites that exchange from the other night. And you're like, you're still thinking about this? Like, you're facing elimination? And Michael Malone would use the press, I think, in a better way. And it was talking about the national media. Right? The national media, ESPN, the coast, the West Coast and the East Coast media. They don't understand. And it was very effective. It gave the Nuggets this us against the world. But David Adelman was making it us against the people that spend their day in and day out covering them. And that's not a fight you want to pick. So it's just very, very odd that David Adelman would be so worried about something like that. I mean, everything that I've said going into this series about if they lose, this being an indictment of David Adelman, still stands, and it's probably even more so now that everyone believes. Like, I've seen it everywhere. I might be the last person that's going to jump on the bandwagon for the Denver Nuggets to come back and win this series. I'm not sold entirely on the Nuggets winning Game 6, but I'm seeing it everywhere. Nuggets are winning this series. But if they don't, with the injuries to Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo, you're really going to have to wonder if David Adelman, is the right man for this job. This was a big job that he took over. Best player in the world, a team that had won a title recently. Expectations high, pressure high. There have been a couple of instances where I feel like maybe all of that is getting to him, and the last couple of nights at the post-game press conference kind of make it seem that way to me. But it's not to say David Adelman didn't figure out some things. And David Adelman talked about, how you can learn from losses, but even listen to this answer. It's like he's still bothered by this.
And I said this in the losses, and I guess it just, when you lose, nobody listens, but there are positives and losses. And you
again, why throw in that line? No, but he's so angry about legitimate lines of questioning. I guess when you lose, nobody listens. Well, not exactly, but generally the sentiment, unless you're the most fanboy of all fans or media members, you tend to look at a loss as negative and like things aren't working. It's very difficult in a loss to be saying, "Oh, everything is just fine and dandy." So it's a natural conclusion that people come to that loss equals bad. Loss equals things not working. But he is right. You can learn things from losses. And maybe one of those things was David Adelman putting some trust in the Jonas Valanciunas and Tyus Joneses of the world. That was a new development. I don't believe that he can do that again in Game 6, but right now it is absolutely one game at a time. Here's David Adelman on what the difference was offensively last night.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the screening was a lot better, which cleaned up guys to have better looks. And I thought other people that haven't been playing, cleaned some things up for us ball handling wise. I thought Tyus was good. He gave us a different element. And Jonas was really good screening, cleaning people up. So a couple of positives there, from guys that have stayed ready and been professional.
Now, I think once again, going to the Tyus Jones and Jonas Valanciunas last night. Again, role players don't tend to play as well on the road. So I don't know if that's the card you want to play for Game 6 and think that it will get it done. But the screening thing, I guess, to David Adelman's credit, he's been constantly bringing it up. So I don't know if he delivered the message in a different way. The more I'm thinking about this, yes, David Adelman had some of the right ideas, but I just feel like what last night was as simple as is the Nuggets realized that they had to do everything. I don't know it was anything David Adelman did. I think it was the circumstance of having your backs against the wall, of being at home and feeling feeling like you wanted to do something good for your fans, to reward them one more time. I think there are plenty of players on the Nuggets that care about those kind of things. So I don't know if they're Tyus Jones and Jonas Valanciunas. I think those, like, nobody was calling for Tyus Jones to play. So credit to him, but I just think the biggest difference for the Denver Nuggets from Game 4 to Game 5, yes, is who Minnesota doesn't have, but it's the Nuggets in that there is no tomorrow mode. And I said, this is kind of a no-win situation for the Denver Nuggets. If they win, they're supposed to. If they lose, then it's going to be really bad because the perception now is no DiVincenzo, no Edwards. Nuggets should win. It's a tough spot for David Adelman to be in. But his team responded, whether it was something he did or whether it was just the moment that they were in, it worked. And they lived to fight another day. Game 6, Thursday night. We're still waiting on the time. It depends on what happens tonight between Portland and San Antonio. If there needs to be another game in that series, basically, if Portland wins, the Nuggets and Wolves will play a bit earlier for the overlap. They'll play at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. If San Antonio wraps up the series, then the NBA feels like we could move it a little bit later. It'll be a 7:30 tip-off from Minnesota. So maybe a reason to watch basketball tonight between Portland and San Antonio. Either way, we'll have the game on Extra Sports 1300, or you could watch the game regardless of what time it is at the Brass Tap on Bass Pro Drive. $3.50 pints of Coors Light, Coors Banquet, Miller Lite, and Mountain Time. Sports, spirits, social, the Brass Tap. More Drive Time Sports right after this. The NBA has come up with their proposal to completely eradicate tanking from the league. Wait till you hear this doozy. Actually, full transparency, I'm not just trying to string you along to get you waiting in anticipation and stay tuned in longer. I have to get a rocket scientist to read over what the NBA is trying to do and explain it to me like I'm 5. Because Shams Charania has a tweet that is longer than the Constitution of the United States to explain how they're going to do this stupid lottery. So we'll try to decipher it. I got Ray here. Between him and I, at least we'll get like half of it decoded, and we'll report back to you here shortly. But Adam Silver, you're going after the wrong thing, dude, and you're trying to swat a fly with a hammer here. You don't need all them words to curb tanking. But anyway. In the meantime, it felt like it went, as Daryl Sutter would say, waste of 8 days for the LA Kings going up against the Colorado Avalanche. But it does give us some time, even though this series went really fast, because we have some downtime, we could kind of look back a little bit more on what the Colorado Avalanche did. And you know what stands out to me as I go back and not just look at game 4, but look at the series in total? Was the best player in that series Gabriel Landeskog? There's some analytics that say that Gabe was the best player from beginning to end. Now, Scott Wedgwood was pretty tremendous, but obviously a goaltender does not impact the game to the level that a two-way forward does. I think that I looked at some of the analytics. I think Gabriel Landeskog was the best player. And you may be saying, Ryan, why are you so shocked about that? Because there was a time where we didn't even think the guy was going to play hockey again. Gabriel Landeskog's return is the, I guess, the gift that keeps on giving. Because every once in a while you stop for a moment and you go, man, isn't this team fortunate that Gabriel Landeskog was actually able to come back? So here's the thing. We went from, Gabriel Landeskog's definitely coming back, to, okay, he's going to be out a year, but he's definitely going to be back next year, to setback, and now he's not going to be back for 2 years, and you're wondering, well, is he ever going to come back? Well, then it was like, well, he is. And during the regular season, no. For the playoffs, okay, how's that going to look? And he was, and that's why maybe his performance against LA shouldn't be that much of a shock, because I thought he was incredibly impactful in the Stars series last year. So we went from not even knowing if the guy's going to come back to what kind of an impact can this guy have, to he was very impactful for a guy that hadn't played hockey in 3 years, to now he's just the best player in a given series. Does Gabriel Landeskog have the inside track to the Conn Smythe this year? I mean, talk about a story. Him merely hoisting a Stanley Cup would be one of the best NHL stories in years. But if the guy wins playoff MVP while doing that, it's just remarkable that this guy just keeps clearing the bar. Whatever bar you set, clears it. You don't think he's coming back? Oh, he's coming back. You don't think he'll be as good as he used to be? He's impactful, just coming into the team cold in a playoff series. Well, okay, but can he sustain that for a whole 82-game season? Played, 60 games? But the playoffs, arguably best player in that series was Gabriel Landeskog. And it seems like to a casual, it would seem like, I understand, like Avalanche fans, you can't really, like, you love this guy a little bit too much. Like, I get it. He's the captain. He's a good player. But come on now. A little bit much. I don't know that it is. I mean, the impact of Gabriel Landeskog, I mean, give credit to Chris McFarland for all the moves that he made. Getting Marty Necas, getting Nazem Kadri back in the fold, adding Jack Drury, completely turning over the goalie room. I don't know, the most impactful addition the Colorado Avalanche in the last 2 years have made are a guy that all Chris McFarland did was decide not to cut him. If that was even an option, really. NHL contracts are kind of weird. Like, that's been the most impactful acquisition for the Colorado Avalanche in these last 2 seasons, is just simply getting back Gabriel Landeskog. Gonna need him. Gonna need everybody. Tonight, Wild and Dallas Stars, pivotal Game 5 of that series. I think the Dallas question is the same as the Minnesota Timberwolves question if you're a Nuggets fan. And maybe this is a bad time to ask it, given where the Denver Nuggets are at in that series. But I feel if you want the team that the Avalanche are more likely to beat, whatever percentage that is, the team that the Avalanche are more likely to beat out of Minnesota and Dallas is Minnesota. I don't think there's an argument. But I just wonder if the desire is there to play Dallas and to exercise those demons. Now, the Nuggets have not handled that same situation very well. So maybe if you're a Nuggets and a Nats fan, you're like, nah, more Minnesota. I don't want to play Dallas. I don't want to relive that. Because Minnesota in the NBA was still as bad of a matchup for Denver as they ever were. The team that they are more likely to beat is Minnesota. But I think there are many Avalanche fans that want the Avs to slay that dragon and beat Dallas in a 7-game series. But one thing's for sure, whether it is Minnesota or whether it is Dallas, it is worlds apart from what they just faced. So everything, Scott Wedgwood's goaltending, the way Gabriel Landeskog played, all that kind of stuff is awesome. And it was a big reason why they finished off the LA Kings in 4 games. It resets. It's a complete and utter reset. Just because you can do that against LA doesn't mean much of anything against Minnesota or Dallas. It is that you are finally back into your own weight class. And the Avs know this. They know this. They're pleased with the result. They're happy that they got that series over and done with as quickly as possible. They understand that it's going to take a little bit more from every single player on this team to be able to get through the next round, and forget the idea of sweeping anybody. And as I start to look at these 2 matchups and what the key will be, I think it's pretty clear. It's special teams. It really is, because special teams, especially in the Dallas series, were monumental. It was Mikko Rantanen going nuclear on his former team, the revenge tour to end all revenge tours from Mikko Rantanen, and it was the Dallas Stars power play. And the Avs unable to score on the power play. It was special teams and Mikko Rantanen that decided that series last year. Same's going to be the case here. I don't expect Mikko Rantanen to have the same series that he had last year, this year. But special teams are still going to be paramount. And with Dallas, it's different than Minnesota. With Dallas, it's how does the Avs penalty kill handle the Dallas power play? Dallas has a lethal power play. The Avs have the best penalty kill unit in the National Hockey League this year. That's strength versus strength. And it would be fascinating to see it play out. If it's Minnesota, it's kind of flipped. Because Minnesota, despite being a very good defensive team, not very good killing off penalties, which is quite the coincidence because the Colorado Avalanche, despite being an absolute wagon and putting up Star Wars numbers this year, offensively, can't find ways to score goals on the power play. And I will remind you that the first power play goal that the Avs got in that LA Kings series was their last one. They got one. And it was on a complete and utter breakdown by the LA Kings that allowed Nathan MacKinnon to score that goal. So we'll get into it over the coming days. But my first blush look at both Minnesota and Dallas, strength versus strength with Dallas, and its weakness versus weakness when it comes to Minnesota, and what will ultimately decide a series between the Avs and those two particular teams. But for now, just sit back and enjoy the hockey like everybody else. Minnesota and Dallas, pivotal Game 5 tonight. Take a break, have more Drive Time Sports after this. Adam Silver, the king of making things more complicated than they need to be, has finally revealed his grand plan to be able to eradicate tanking. No more tanking. May I present to you the 3-2-1 rule? Or is it a rule? What are they calling it, Ray? The 3-2-1 lottery system?
Yeah, believe that. Yeah.
3-2-1 dumb idea. So here's what it is. If you are the worst of the worst, you are Utah, you are Washington, you are Brooklyn, you do not get as many ping pong balls you don't get the most ping pong balls. You only get 2 ping pong balls. Very important for me to tell you, be very specific about what they get. 2 ping pong balls is what the worst teams in the league get. Okay? And you're wondering, well, who gets the most ping pong balls? Blame my broadcast partner on the switchbacks for why I'm emphasizing certain words in my sentence. The teams that get the most ping pong balls, so juvenile, are the teams, they suck, but they are not the worst of the worst. Okay, so I need to pull up the standings. NBA standings this year. So Ray, help me through this here, because there are talks of quadrants and lots of other stuff that I don't quite. So how many of, I guess Shams tweeted this out in this graphic novel that he wrote on Twitter. So it's
14.
so first of all, I buried this a little bit. 16 teams are now included in the lottery.
14 to 16.
Right. 14 before, now 16 are allowed in.
Okay, you're right,
Okay. I mean, the relegation zone, like, what are we doing? Are you going to actually now relegation zone for a sport that's international as the basketball is in a league? You know, you can't just throw around the word relegation.
Yeah, that's true.
Because relegation means that teams are going to the G League, which, by the way, would be better than this slop that Adam Silver has put together. But I digress and continue. Okay, bottom 3 record are the teams that only get 2 ping pong balls, and but they can't have any lower than the 12th pick.
Correct.
Which already right there, who cares?
Yeah.
You want to punish these teams, then punish them. But okay, so you want to give them fewer ping pong balls, 1 fewer. So the bottom 3 teams are going to get only 2 ping pong balls. The next ones would be what? The 9th and also the 9th and 10th teams in the play-in get the and this is how they feel like they'll incentivize tanking teams to actually go for the play-in. Because if you get in the 9th and 10th spots, you're going to get 2 ping pong balls, just like the 3 worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
Okay.
But 7 and 8, if you make playoffs, I believe you get
make the
play
play
in.
Well, but you would make the playoffs. You're right.
Right. No. Yeah. No. If you win the play in, you get 1.
Thank you for being willing to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. Here's a ping pong ball.
A ping pong ball.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who are the teams that are getting the 3 ping pong balls? They are the teams that are left, right? The teams that are remaining.
Right.
So why can't you just do it by league, NBA.com? So these are...
It would be like the Bulls.
So the Bulls would get the best, some of the best lottery odds.
Pelicans.
Bucks. Nets. I'm
Nets.
sorry. I said the Nets were the worst of the worst. I forgot the Pacers ended up edging them out. So the teams that would get 2 ping pong balls this year, Utah, Sacramento. No, I lie. The 3 worst, Washington, Indiana, and then there would be some kind of coin flip between
Sacramento and
Utah and no. It would be Washington, Indiana, and Brooklyn. You guys are the punished ones.
Mhm.
You get 2 ping pong balls, but don't worry, you're not going to pick any lower than 12. Okay. Name me the last NBA draft that we felt were at least 12 players deep. Okay, so I don't know what the to say you won't drop below 12. Oh, cool. We can end up with Christian Brown.
I'm trying to think. So, but have a floor of the 12th pick, so they can pick lower than 12. Right? Is that what that's saying?
No, what it's saying is you won't pick any worse than 12.
Right. Yeah.
You're guaranteed to not pick any worse than 12, but your chances by 1 ping pong ball multiply by how many teams get 3 ping pong balls and the teams that get 1 ping pong ball. So there's that. So Washington, Indiana, and Brooklyn would be in trouble because they would be. Adam Silver's very upset with you. You only get 2 ping pong balls. Okay. Then Utah, which was the most egregious tanker of anybody in the NBA, given the links they went to tank, mind you, right?
Yes.
They're still getting the most ping pong, not the most ping pong balls. That's the other thing too, right? They don't get the most, they would get 3. Sacramento would get 3. Memphis would get 3. Dallas would get 3. New Orleans would get 3. And then Chicago and Milwaukee would get 3. And then you would have, and then Charlotte, Miami, LA, and Golden State would get 3 ping pong balls. You see what I'm doing here? Like, all of this doesn't matter because it's stupid. It is not even the biggest problem that faces the NBA. But Adam Silver clearly felt like this was the most fixable problem because he's never going to fix load management. Never going to do anything because the only real way to curtail load management, because even the 65 game rule, as successful as it has been, and I am a proponent of it, plenty of guys still sat out games, right? But it led to a very compelling MVP race because you had Jokic, you had Shea, you had Luka, you had Wemby, all of those guys crossing the finish line. Well, Luka didn't, but got the exception. But you had these guys crossing the finish line. So maybe he feels like load management is fixed. I don't think that it is. But that's a bigger issue than tanking. So the argument against the teams that finish with the worst record being punished to the point where they don't get a draft in the top whatever is, well, you're giving them no chance to get better. They're going to be stuck in the middle. Adam Silver said the worst place to be is stuck in the middle. So you're saying that the worst teams could get stuck in the middle. But if you give a little bit of effort and you're not one of the worst 3 teams, you're going to get a better chance. So tell me how this curbs tanking and why Charles Barkley's idea of just giving everyone 1 ping pong ball is why, like, this stuff is so convoluted. And already I remember watching last year when he rigged it for the Dallas Mavericks. And that's the other thing that I have yet to mention, and I'll just mention the caveat that I believe that the draft lottery is rigged, so none of this really matters. But I'm watching the draft lottery last year where the Dallas Mavericks were inexplicably given the number 1 pick, despite committing the worst trade in the history of sports, and I couldn't even follow who actually still had a chance. I saw logos, I saw envelopes, I saw this team can't finish out of the bottom 3. I saw random lines filled in because apparently deductive reasoning says this team was going. I can't even follow it. So here's my big question. If it's this complicated, if the fix to tanking is this complicated, why do it? Why do it? I have come up with a very elegant solution that I still am a big proponent of. There will be no ping pong balls, no balls of any kind involved with my proposal. My proposal is to simply give these teams that are tanking what they desire. And after that, if you want to say you can't be back in the top 5, then go for it. The Rockies have had to pick outside the top 10 because they've been so garbage. That's fine if you want to be punitive down the road, but at least give them what they're searching for. I think he's addressing a problem that fans don't feel like is a huge problem. Fans in Utah and Washington and Indiana, they are on board with this because they know it is a real way to get better. And you're going to do this, and here's where it's going to end up. You are going to inevitably have a team that we're going to look back in 5 years and we're like, my God, they haven't gotten any better. Why? Because of this stupid 3-2-1 lottery system. Just do reverse order of finish, give Utah what they want, and say, we don't want to see your face here ever again. It's unnecessarily complicated, and it's unnecessarily complicated for not even the worst problem that this league has. But Adam Silver will stand up there and he'll pat himself on the back and he'll talk about being revolutionary and all this kind of stuff. And we'll just look at him and like, you are the worst at your job in all of sport. Rob Manfred has now passed you. You are at the bottom of commissioners in all of sport. And stuff like this doesn't help. I don't expect you to understand a single word that I said because I don't even understand a single word that I said. That's how stupid this new lottery system is. What's driving the show is next. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or you are watching the show anywhere you scroll at 740 KVOR and at Extra Sports 1300. You could interact with the show at 719-247-1313 by calling or texting in, or if you are watching the live stream, you can just comment on whatever social media platform you are on, and we will get to those thoughts as we move through this hour. We start with, well, first, Kyle Freeland's getting knocked around pretty good by the Cincinnati Reds, and as he makes his return to the Rockies rotation, 3-0 Reds. He just hit a 2-run home run. So it's going to mess with the xERA. What did I see the other day? xERA, some kind of, analytic thing had the Rockies pitching staff as being number one in the in Major League Baseball. What is it? B-WAR. Number one in B-WAR. I think it's just the pitching staff WAR. Wins above replacement is best in the league. Kyle Freeland not helping as he comes off the DL and gets knocked around in the first inning. There are 2 outs. Keep you updated on that game. But these are the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, we start with the Denver Nuggets staying alive.
Jumper's no good. Rebound down to Cam Johnson. In the front court, it's Spencer. Dog right-handed tomahawk! Oh, Spencer Jones! Welcome to the 2026 playoffs, bro!
Jason Kosmicki on the call for Altitude Sports Radio, as heard on Extra Sports 1300. 125-113. The Nuggets get it done at home to force a Game 6 against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Spencer Jones has to be the feel-good story of the evening with 20 points and played terrific defense on Julius Randle, who now becomes their de facto number one scorer with Anthony Edwards out and Dante DiVincenzo. But it is a rule of basketball that I adhere to, that supporting cast members, role players, don't play as well on the road. So if you're looking for signs last night that the Nuggets have something figured out and that they can bring it to Game 6 and ultimately to a Game 7 and come back from 3-1 down, Spencer Jones's performance last night is not one of them. Great job on him being able to do that. I thought he played great. But he basically becomes the Io DeSomo of the Denver Nuggets, right? DeSomo didn't have the game he had in Minnesota in Denver. But there are a couple of things that you saw last night that you may be able to buy into moving forward to Game 6 and maybe a Game 7. First of all, the physicality. The Nuggets finally throwing screens, defending hard, checking guys. Jonas Valanciunas coming in, knocking some guys to the floor. The Nuggets brought the physicality. And another word that you can use in lieu of physicality is the competitiveness. The competitiveness of the Denver Nuggets, which seemed to be lacking so much over the last few games, was there. And I think a big reason why is because the Nuggets had far more to lose in that game than Minnesota did. Right? And Minnesota lives to fight another day, regardless of what happens last night. The Nuggets are not as lucky, so the Denver Nuggets were the more desperate team. But now I would expect Minnesota's desperation level to go up a little bit. Nuggets are still going to stay desperate. Their season will remain on the line in Game 6 and Game 7. If that was the catalyst to be facing the end of your season to finally make it look like the Denver Nuggets wanted to win a game of this series more than Minnesota did, then that's something that should continue into Game 6 and Game 7 because the Nuggets have no margin for error. But the other thing along with it is the way that Nikola Jokic played. Nikola Jokic got back to looking like the best player in the world and quieted some of that ridiculous noise that somehow with one great season and one great regular season, Shea all of a sudden has taken a title from Nikola Jokic that it took Nikola Jokic 3 MVPs and an NBA title to be able to earn himself. He looked like the best player in the world. And we know that he's not healthy. He's not right physically. Whatever is ailing him, he's not right. But last night, he looked like his old self. And I think part of it is as good a defense as Rudy Gobert has played on Nikola Jokic. The idea that he can just do that for 7 games is too much to ask. Saw a picture on Twitter of Rudy Gobert donning the oxygen mask in the tunnel. Nikola Jokic was wearing him out. And I don't, and this isn't like, oh, let's clown on Rudy Gobert. The guy has done more defensively against Nikola Jokic in this series, in the first 4 games of this series, than most every other center in the NBA has done for a half of basketball against Nikola Jokic. But this is just the reality that Rudy Gobert cannot continue to be one-on-one with Nikola Jokic for every minute of every one of these games and expect Jokic to not wear him down. I think the play of Jokic, just because we have such a large sample size, we have so many more times where Nikola Jokic has been the guy the Nuggets need him to be than the alternative, that I think you may very well get that version of Nikola Jokic in Game 6. And that's what it starts with. If Nikola Jokic is playing like the best player in the world, the Nuggets got more than a shot. Jokic and the physicality, 2 things that were lacking in the last couple of games that the Nuggets seem to have found, and they will have to translate into Game 6 and Game 7 for that matter if they are going to finish off the Minnesota Timberwolves and pull off a 3-1 comeback. But 1 game down, Game 6 coming up Thursday night out in Minnesota, 7 or 7:30, depending on the result of the Blazers-Spurs game tonight. So we should know late this evening what time exactly the Nuggets will play. Sometime in the 7 p.m. hour on Thursday is when they will play. Story number 2 is the NHL this week is unveiling the finalists for all of those awards, or all of their awards. The first one was the Ted Lindsay. The Ted Lindsay Award goes to who the players in the NHL vote as the most outstanding player this season. Sounds a little bit like the MVP, right? MOP, MVP, it's very close. There's a nuance difference, which I will get into momentarily, but it's basically who the players thought was the best this year. 67% of the time, the person who wins the Ted Lindsay also wins the Hart Trophy for league's most valuable player. Nathan McKinnon wasn't even one of the 3 finalists for the Ted Lindsay Award. That is what's shocking. I was set to, be able to lay out the case for Nathan McKinnon to be the MVP, but acknowledging that Nikita Kucherov has a great argument. That's a very close race. But the players themselves did not even think Nathan McKinnon was one of the 3 most outstanding players this year in the NHL? That's preposterous. You're not going to convince me that Nathan McKinnon isn't the MVP, but I'm willing to listen. To say that Nathan McKinnon is not, because again, it's close to MVP, it's not MVP, it's most outstanding. To say that there were 3 players in the NHL that were better this year than Nathan McKinnon, that's a joke. And I'll tell you the player that doesn't deserve it. As great of a season as he had, really it comes down to 4 guys, right, for 3 spots. It's McDavid, it's Kucherov, it's McKinnon, and it's Macklin Celebrini. And Macklin Celebrini has had a phenomenal year. He's not one of the best 3 players in the league. He didn't have one of the best 3 seasons in the league. He does not have one of the best 3 statistical cases to be the most outstanding player this season. And normally I'm a guy that, straight up and down, who's your MVP, who's your this, who's your that. I don't give I pay too much attention to who finishes 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever in these voting. But because the Ted Lindsay Award is so predictive on who will win the Hart Trophy, that's what bothers me, that Nathan McKinnon, by his peers, no less, was not considered one of the 3 most outstanding players in the NHL this season. And I got to believe it has to do with the Avalanche record being held against Nathan McKinnon and the season Marty Necas had, ignoring the fact that part of the reason why Marty Necas had a career best year was because he was playing every single night with Nathan McKinnon. And a good amount of his goals were assisted by Nathan McKinnon. So if Nathan McKinnon were not to win the MVP, it would bother me mildly because I think he deserves it, but there are other very deserving candidates. To say that he wasn't one of the 3 best players in the league this year, that's too much. I love Macklin Celebrini, not this year, not for him. But this basically tells you that Nathan McKinnon, if history is any indication, not going to win MVP. And the person who cares the least about that? Nathan McKinnon. It's funny how he and Nikola Jokic, the state's 2 biggest star athletes, are very similar in that way. Nathan McKinnon doesn't care. I'm caring on his behalf. I'm caring on behalf of you, the Avalanche fan. I think that's stupid. But there are stupider things, like this new lottery system that is rolled out by Adam Silver. It is the 3-2-1 lottery system. If you are one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA, you will not get 3 ping pong balls. You only get 2. If you're the next handful or so teams that don't completely tank your season, but you're also not good enough to compete for the play-in, you're going to get 3 ping pong balls. And if you are the teams that make the play-in, so don't worry about tanking the play-in, because if you make the play-in, you get a chance to go to the playoffs, and you also get 1 ping pong ball for the draft. Second time around, I think I explained it a little bit better. But here's the thing. It's all very convoluted, and it's also unnecessary. And Adam Silver is going to say that this is revolutionary and this will curtail tanking. It's not going to. It just won't. It may make some teams that are kind of sitting on the fence. Do I go for the play-in? I mean, this is what it seems like to me. It's a cursory gesture it's making it kind of appear like he's punishing the most egregious tankers by giving them only 2 ping pong balls and not 3. But what he's really doing is propping up one of his other terrible ideas, which was the play-in, by saying, hey, you get a double dip. If you make the play-in, we'll also make you technically eligible for the number 1 pick in the draft. So here's Adam Silver propping up one of his other bad ideas with a bad idea. It doesn't need to be this complicated. Tanking is not the scourge of this league like he thinks it is. It's at least not number one on the list. I don't think it curbs tanking to the degree that he thinks it will. And it's a lot of word. You know, when people are trying to convince you of something, they kind of word vomit. Like they say a bunch of stuff, hoping that you'll latch onto something and go, oh, that's a good point. Or you'll just become so confused that you drop the argument. Like that's what it seems like Adam Silver is doing. You are going to drown in a sea of words and math. And then you're going to get off my back about tanking. This is the revolutionary idea. Teams that are the three worst in the league get one less ping pong ball than the teams that are the fourth worst, fifth worst, sixth worst, seventh worst. Just make it like the NFL. Eliminate the draft lottery, which you rig anyway, and just do reverse order of finish. If you care about the fans, I think the fans would go for that. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, speaking of awards voting, I found something very interesting in the voting for the NBA Executive of the Year. Yes, the Nuggets were represented, but not by who you might think. Top of the third in Cincinnati, Rockies trailing 3-0. Chase Dollander the other day, Rockies pitcher, said they're going to be doing something special. Like the team is bought in. And the results are better than they have been in years. Like, you can scoff, and I understand with the Broncos and the Nuggets and the Avalanche, it's like the fact they're 13-16 is like they're not a great baseball team. And I acknowledge that. But the thing that strikes me is how bought in the players are to what they're doing, the things that they're saying. I don't recall Rockies players saying over the last few years. And also the results are better, and it's been one off season. Like, that's the thing. As right on cue, the Rockies hit a solo home run, Edouard Julien, to make it 3-1. Like, this team is competing at a level. They're winning more games to this stage of the season than they have in the previous three. But you watch this team on a nightly basis, they're more competitive than you can recall any of the last three Rockies teams. They're more bought in. And you just wonder, it's kind of like I think some of the calculation with David Adelman. Like, you're not reimagining the wheel here. There's some things that the Rockies are leaning into, base stealing, aggressive base running, all that kind of stuff, how they manage their bullpen and all that. But they're not reinventing baseball here. We're not to the point where this is the next Moneyball. And they're doing something that no one else is doing. But they're doing something. It's like with the Nuggets removing Michael Malone and Calvin Booth. Not a radical change. The timing of it was quite radical, but the idea was we got a lot of things here that are actually okay. We just need to remove this one thing. And with the Rockies, it feels like they've just been sitting on their hands for like 3 years. And I mean the front office, I mean the manager. Like, they're not doing anything. And the fact that Warren Schaefer comes in and says, we're going to do this, that's different, and this, that's different. Again, nothing revolutionary. And the players are like, oh my God, this is amazing. We're going to try and steal bases now. Antonio Senzatella is going to be a closer and not a starter. Like, these aren't amazing things, but they're making all the difference right now. And it almost makes you upset as a Rockies fan that all it would take is just maybe a new voice and just to try some stuff. And I want to say the other word. I don't want to say stuff, but I'm regulated by the FCC. Just try some stuff. That's all the Rockies are doing. They're trying stuff. And they got 13 wins in April. And it's been June, and June when the Rockies have gotten to 13 wins the last 3 years. You got enough on your plate. You got enough to watch. Like, if you really feel compelled, you could catch this team when it hits the summer. I just want to let you know what's going on. They're trying stuff, and it's kind of working. Previous regimes just, I don't know, sat and said, woe is me. Can't do anything about this. Warren Schaefer comes in and is like, I can do something about it. So good on them. 3-1, Reds lead the Rockies, top of the third inning. Rockies still batting. This also, sticking with Colorado sports, I saw the Executive of the Year award voting come out. Brad Stevens of the Celtics won. I guess that's okay. I mean, I felt, weren't there more significant moves made? I mean, they got rid of Porzingis and everything. Was the idea that Brad Stevens knew which tiles to pull from the Jenga tower and it would remain upright? Is that what credit he's getting? And I think Brad Stevens is phenomenal. But like it seemed like the whole idea of the Boston Celtics this year was to cut payroll to get rid of players. But fine, he's executive of the year. It's not something that an award I care that much about. But I look down the voting and I get to the name Josh Kroenke. Josh Kroenke received a second place vote and a third place vote for executive of the year. And I tweeted this out, but I legitimately wonder it. Do NBA award voters not know the names of the Nuggets general managers? So they just put Josh Kroenke? Or is Josh Kroenke getting credit for hiring Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, who then went out and traded Michael Porter Jr. for Cam Johnson and added Tim Hardaway? And by the way, I didn't see any other owners' names on that list. Governors, sorry. Josh Kroenke getting a second and third place vote. Very weird. If you want to give out your second or third place vote, how about giving it to John Wallace and Ben Tenzer? I mean, yeah, Josh Kroenke promoted them, and we kind of scoffed at the whole idea of a dual-headed front office. But ultimately, the credit from there on out goes to the guys who are actually making the moves. So if it said Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, I'd actually be like, you know what? Good for them. They probably deserve some votes. They made some of the more significant moves of any team in the offseason. But no, Josh Kroenke gets that credit. That's weird. Could you argue that Ben Tenzer and John Wall, we didn't get a lot going on. So Kevin Durant goes to Houston. I think they ended up worse. But that was a big deal. That was a big trade. The Luka trade was last year, so you can't give it to Rob Pelinka. I don't know, not a ton of candidates. I just know that the Nuggets candidate is not Josh Kroenke, it's Ben Tenzer and John Wallace. Put some respect on Ben Wallace's name. 719-247-1313. And today has been a day showcasing some bad ideas. This next one might take the cake, and you will not be surprised to hear it's coming from the world of college athletics. Tomorrow night, Switchbacks FC taking on the Colorado Rapids in the round of 16 of the U.S. Open Cup. Roland Vargas and myself will be on the call from Dick's Sporting Goods Park. Love to have you join up, whether you are here in Colorado Springs or whether you are making the trek up to Commerce City. You could always download the Extra Sports 1300 app and listen from your seat, but we do hope you will join us at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Spoke with Matt Mahoney today, spoke with Alan McCann today. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me talking to Alan was the Switchbacks feel like the pressure's on the Rapids. And you could see why he would think that, right? It would be beneath an MLS club to lose to a USL championship team. Right. And the switch, even though there's a more nuanced argument than that, not all USL championship teams are created equally, nor are all MLS teams created equally. Like there are plenty of USL championship teams that could knock off a few MLS teams. We've already seen it in the US Open Cup, and we're certainly hoping to see it tomorrow night at Dick's Sporting Goods Park. But because of that perception of MLS versus USL championship, the pressure is on the Rapids. And the Switchbacks are embracing that. So that'll be tomorrow night, 7 o'clock on Extra Sports 1300. Now this, so on the day that Adam Silver comes out with this 3-2-1 lottery system, that just seems like a really complicated, bad idea. Here's a very simple, bad idea. We are now getting 76 teams in the NCAA tournament. So congratulations, Auburn, Seton Hall, San Diego State, and Indiana. If you do this as good of a job this year as next year, which is to say that you are, in San Diego State's case, a very high-ranking team in one of the group of 6 conferences, or you're some of these other ones that are in the bigger conferences but were mediocre, you get to go to the NCAA tournament. And why am I even bringing up San Diego State? Because this all is not a ploy to get the Mountain West more teams. Or I guess they're going to the Pac-12. Same difference. It's not to get more access to the smaller schools, to the lesser conferences. It's the Indianas and the Auburns that are going to get these additional bids. And then they're going to make all the teams from mid-majors play each other early on in this expanded play-in to hopefully get all of them knocked out, or at least trim the field in half, so they have to play all the power schools. So, look, it's a bad idea no matter what. I don't think it should be expanded to even give more access to this smaller conferences and schools. I don't believe that. Especially with conference realignment and stuff. If you are a big time school, then go to a big time conference. Like it's never been easier than it is right now for you to do that. So I'm not sitting here saying that the Mount West or the Pac-12 have got to get 6 or 7 teams in. The reason why they deserve more is because the committee keeps looking at these mediocre SEC and Big Ten teams and say they deserve it more. But that's a flaw in their selection. That's not saying we need to expand. So I don't even think expanding is the answer, because it gives more access. But it's not even giving more access to the smaller schools. It's giving more access to the bigger schools. And it's a cash grab. The old saying, the answer is money. What's the question? Doesn't matter if it makes what was at one time the most perfect sporting event ever into a bloated mess. But I would expect nothing less from the people who make the decisions in college sports. It's a bad idea. It's not making the tournament better. It's going to make it worse. And it's not the triumph for the little guy that I'm sure some people, including the NCAA, will make it out to be. But they were always going to do this. Once they expand once, they're never going to contract. They're only going to expand even more. So we knew this was coming. I knew this was coming. Guess you just got to live with it. No, I don't. I have a microphone. I can complain about it. But this is not better. But that will be the case starting next year. And then, man, you really want to see how morbid curiosity as to who are the teams that can't make their way into a 76-team tournament. Like, what are the resumes of these world beaters that are going to be Joe Lunardi's last 4 out? Like, I've already gotten to the point where I don't think there are a lot of snubs. I look at the resumes, I'm like, yeah, that team doesn't deserve to get in. I can't wait to see who the last 4 teams are out that just missed in, saying we deserved a shot in a 76-team bracket. But that's going to happen. That's going to happen. The Denver Nuggets last night, with their 125-113 win, have forced a Game 6. And I talked at length today about the physicality, the want to, the effort level, however you want to phrase it, going up for the Denver Nuggets. I think someone that deserves a little bit of credit is Jaden McDaniels. Maybe it took a game later than we all expected. We would think that what Jaden McDaniels said after Game 3 were fighting words, and the Nuggets would respond in kind, not with actual fighting, but with the fight, the kind of fight they showed last night. They did not show that in Game 4. But the little fracas at the end of the game with Nikola Jokic and Jaden McDaniels, perhaps that was the thing that pushed it over the top, because it sure seemed like a lot of the Nuggets' ire was directed at Jaden McDaniels, and the picture that has been captured of Christian Brown dunking on Jaden McDaniels and pointing at him. If the Nuggets come back to win this series, that's going to be hung in the Nuggets Louvre. But it sure seemed like the Denver Nuggets were very upset at Jaden McDaniels. And I say finally. The fact that he called you all bad defenders should have been enough, but getting into it with Nikola Jokic, perhaps that was enough. And it certainly got the Nuggets fans into it, who booed every time Jaden McDaniels touched the ball. McDaniels unbothered by it.
Cool. I mean, I like it. You see, I'm probably shaking my head the whole time they booing me. I'm laughing, so they can't get in my head. I already expect it to come.
And I believe him. I mean, there are guys that are just built that way, and I think Jaden McDaniels is. But it's not about Jaden McDaniels. The fans weren't going there to boo him because they thought they would throw him off of his game. They were booing him as a cathartic experience because they hate that guy now. So they want to boo him. That's the way we show that emotion. McDaniels isn't bothered by it. I don't expect him to be, but the fans did it, not because they thought that Jaden McDaniels would be bothered by it, but because they wanted to. It was their show of, we don't like you. And it's more about the fans than it is Jaden McDaniels. And I wonder, I saw a clip from Draymond Green from his podcast where he said he thought Nikola Jokic was getting into it with Jaden McDaniels because he was trying to provoke McDaniels into making what Draymond Green called a bad decision. Basically, like Nikola Jokic is trying to goat Jaden McDaniels into throwing a punch and get suspended. That feels like something Draymond Green would do. That doesn't feel like something Nikola Jokic would do. Now, if there is more than just pent-up frustration being let out by Nikola Jokic because of Jaden McDaniels' late basket in Game 4, if there's more to it than that, I think it's Nikola Jokic recognizing that his team that night did not have the fight necessary to forget winning that game, winning the series. So if you're giving Nikola Jokic credit and not just thinking that he was acting out because he was frustrated, I think it's not so much to bait Jaden McDaniels into doing something stupid. I think it's to fire up his teammates. And we've seen this from Nikola Jokic. One thing that I think has been ridiculous is the idea that Nikola Jokic, because of his poor play, that perhaps he's lost his competitive fire. And look, I think that the weight that he has had on his shoulders for years now is weighing on him a little bit. But like, this is a guy that we've seen multiple times yelling on the sideline, firing his guys up. I think we had one of those instances this very year. So maybe his competitiveness has gone down slightly, but it's still higher than most everybody on that Nuggets team. But if Jokic had ulterior motives to go after Jaden McDaniels, I think it would be to fire up his teammates rather than trying to get Jaden McDaniels to punch him in the face. And I know what Jaden McDaniels said to Nikola Jokic, which is not nice. You should never use those words. But Jaden McDaniels is never slugging Nikola Jokic. So I think there's a flaw in Draymond Green's thinking a little bit. I think he's projecting what Draymond Green would be doing in that situation rather than Nikola Jokic. But I do think Nikola Jokic might have done it for his teammates. Emblematic of, even though we've been repeatedly punked in the last few games, you're not going to punk us here. We're drawing the line here, as unsatisfactory as that might be after you get, run off the court in game 4. But maybe that's what was needed, because it was a very different feel from the Denver Nuggets in game 5 than it had been in game 4, 3, and 2. And I think it can be sustained. The circumstances, while the venue changes, remain the same. The Nuggets are still playing for their season. The Minnesota Timberwolves will not be eliminated on Thursday night, even if they lose. So I do think you're going to see that level again from the Denver Nuggets. Now, my big question going into game 6, and we got an extra day here to ponder this, what I wonder is what Minnesota is going to look like. Okay, they get an extra day to tweak some things without Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo. They had an idea. I mean, it's still fresh, the injuries to these guys, right? So they come out with a plan for, game 5 works great, right? But the Nuggets adjust. They start doubling DeSumo, and Minnesota doesn't really have a counter to that. Now they're going to figure out their counter. So what that looks like and how effective it can be. Does the law of role players playing better at home hold? And who might that player be for Minnesota to be the unlikely hero to chip in? I don't expect another player to go for 40 like DeSumo did, but somebody could impact the game in much the way Spencer Jones did in game 5. So what tweaks do the Minnesota Timberwolves make? And then kind of the same thing I've been talking about the Nuggets. How much higher does Minnesota's desperation level go up? Do they start for the first time, maybe all series? Certainly since game 1, the Nuggets looked like they clearly wanted to win more than Minnesota. does that pendulum start to swing back the other way? Because I really think that Minnesota deep down believes the same thing that you and I do, or at least I do. I haven't heard from you on this, but that I believe if the Nuggets win game 6, they will win game 7. I don't know if I'm there yet that the Nuggets will win game 6, but if they do, they're going to win game 7. And I think Minnesota deep down knows that if they don't take care of home court and they have to go back to Denver, that they're probably flying back to Minnesota and then making plans, and probably not even flying to Minnesota. They're probably flying to Cancun. So I would expect the Timberwolves to want Thursday night's game 6 more than it seemed like they wanted game 5. And all of this is natural human psychology. But I think my intrigue is more, honestly, with Minnesota and what they look like and what they do compared to the Denver Nuggets. I think the Denver Nuggets have found what it is. The physicality and Nikola Jokic playing like that. That's the recipe for success. Bottle it up, copy it, paste it, bring it to the next game. 7 or 7:30, depending on whether they need another game in the Spurs-Blazers series. But either way, you can hear the game on Extra Sports 1300 on Thursday, and you can watch it at the Brass Tap off Bass Pro Drive. They are offering $3.50 pints of Coors Light, Coors Banquet, Miller Lite, and Mountain Time Sports, Spirits, Social, the Brass Tap. That is a wrap for me. I hope you will join me tomorrow night for the Switchbacks and Rapids. Should be a lot of fun. I guess I want to check out the Minnesota Dallas series, but also new episode of Daredevil. So that's also part of my viewing list. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk soon.